So we finally have the new Labour government's budget for autumn of 2024. This is the first Labour budget since 2009. It's also the first budget presented by a female chancellor. And we have had months and months of speculation of things that might be in it, all these things, all these stories. I've tried to avoid going down that route too much because, as is always the case, not everything comes true. And that absolutely has happened today. But I'm going to take you through everything that is worth knowing about. Not the full amount. The Chancellor Rachel Reeves, she spoke for about 77 minutes, which is a long time, probably one of the longest ones in decades. There's a lot of information there, but I'll take you through what you need to know, what was there, and also some things that weren't there, in case you had been reading the speculation or listening to the speculation and thinking, oh my God, this is going to happen, and it hasn't. So where do we start? Let's start off with taxes, and let's start off also with the big thing that has been mooted for a while, and this is a change to national insurance. Now, you might remember that in the Labour manifesto in the election in the summer, they said they will not be making any changes to the tax paid by working people, specifically income tax, national insurance, and VAT. Well, they've kind of stuck to that because nothing has changed in those areas. They have not increased them for what we actually pay for getting our pay packet or what we pay when we're out and about. But they have made changes to employer national insurance contributions. Now, at the moment, when you get paid, obviously you will pay national insurance as well as income tax on your salary, but employers will also be paying a set amount. And that's currently 13.8% of your earnings above £175 a week. So low earners, they don't have to pay this, but everyone else, they will be paying a decent chunk of money all the time. Now, this is going to increase from next April. It go up by 1.2 percentage points to 15%. So that is going to be more money that employers are going to be paying every single year on your salary. However, they are also going to lower the threshold where this kicks in. So at the moment, on an annual basis, if the employee earns less than £9,100 a year, the employer does not have to make contributions. That floor is lowering by a huge amount, down to £5,000. So in theory, that would mean that a lot more employers not only would be paying more national insurance contributions on employees' wages, they'd also be paying on more people. So a huge amount of cash going on there, in theory, coming back into the economy. The Chancellor said that it was eventually will raise £28 billion a year. So a big, big, big chunk of money they need to raise. Because remember, not only was that £22 billion black hole, there's also just general extra spending that's needed for things like the NHS and other bits like that. However, one thing they've also announced is something called the employment allowance. That has also been increased. And this is for smaller businesses, actually, when they have to start paying national insurance contributions for their employees. That will move from £5,000 a year to £10,500 a year. And in the speech, the Chancellor said that means that 865,000 businesses won't pay any employer national insurance contributions at all. And half of businesses will see no change to what they currently contribute. So absolutely, it's going to be happening. But it sounds like the smaller and medium-sized businesses won't see any change here at all. And some of them might even not pay anything at all. But the bigger employers, they will. Now, there was a lot of speculation beforehand about what impact this might have, because although it doesn't actually impact the money we take back on our pay slip in our accounts every single month, that won't change. It could have an impact because employers have less money. So good news there. I think that the smaller and medium-sized employers won't be impacted by this, but obviously larger ones could. And they might decide that when it comes around to negotiating a pay rise, they might go, well, no, we won't do that. We won't give as much because we're having to pay that extra bit of money into what we pay for your salary anyway. You just don't see it. You go straight to the government. Or the other thing potentially also is around pensions, because obviously employers also make pension contributions for everyone. Varies the amount, but they potentially might reduce what they currently give or stop giving an increase there. They might match you on as a result of this. So that could still happen, obviously could have an impact on us longer term. But it'd be interesting to see what the economists and the analysts say about that kind of employment allowance threshold increases as smaller businesses don't pay, how much of an impact that might actually have on everybody. Next up, let's talk about income tax. Now, as I said, we already know that isn't going to go up. That was in the manifesto pledge, and they have stuck to that. There was, however, a huge amount of speculation that the freeze on the income tax thresholds, which the Conservatives introduced back in 2022 and due to last until 2028, was going to increase. which basically would be a stealth tax rise. It already was a stealth tax increase when the Conservatives added it, and if Labour had continued that, that would also be basically, all right, we're not going to increase income tax, but ultimately, as you get a pay rise, you get what's called fiscal drag, you get pulled into these higher tax bands, you end up paying more tax on those amounts above those different thresholds. So that looked like it was going to happen, but it isn't. Okay, so that freeze will still, they're not going to change and end it early. The freeze will still continue until 2028. So we're still going to have fiscal drag. We're still going to be taxed more on our earnings. But from April 2028, it will then increase in line with inflation. So that's good news that that isn't happening. Didn't expect it to be repealed at all. Really expected it to go the other way. So that is good news. Now, in terms of other earnings, the other big news story, which we actually already leaked in advance, is around the minimum wage. Now, this is going up by a huge 6.7%. So if you are 21 or over, it will go up from £11.44 an hour to £12.21 an hour. That's from April 2025 that's going to happen. So that's still the national living wage. It's still less than the real living wage, but that's a big increase, getting it closer to kind of really what does make a difference in terms of being able to survive out there. However, there was an even larger increase, a 16.3% increase for young adults, so 18 to 20-year-olds. Their minimum wage is going up from £8.60 to £10 an hour. So a big, big increase there. And the idea is that over time, it will be brought in line with the national living wage. So rather than that being for 21-year-olds and over, it'll be from 18-year-olds and over. So again, eventually we'll get there. Apprentice also saw a hike. That is moving up from £6.40 to £7.55 an hour. Again, these are all from April 2025. Now, again, that is good news for you if you are earning that money. Could obviously be a concern to some employers, along with that national insurance employer contribution hike. A lot more money they have to put into wage pots for some areas. So interesting to see how that one does pan out. There is obviously the potential there that some people might have to increase prices to pass that on to us. Again, we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Now, the other big tax areas. Tax is the big thing here again, because they've raised in total about £40 billion worth of tax increases across the piece, right? There are some other big ones here. Capital gains. Now, capital gains is something that most people on a day-to-day basis, they don't pay it. In fact, some people go for their entire life and never having paid capital gains tax, because this is the tax you pay on profits when you sell assets, which could be like shares, as long as they aren't in an ISA. Obviously, tax-free in an ISA, but outside of an ISA, shares that you sell, if you sell second homes, other things that you've got, I don't know, some people might have like expensive wine or art or things like that, right? Anything that's basically worth more than £6,000, if you sell it and make a profit, it's subject to capital gains tax. Now, there is still a tax-free allowance that you get, that's £3,000 that's tax-free. But above that right now, if you're a basic rate taxpayer, you would pay 10%. And if you're a high rate taxpayer, you would pay 20% tax on those different levels. Okay, that's what you'd be paying right now on any of those profits. From next April, they will increase. So basic rate taxpayers will see this increase from 10% to 18%. So quite a big increase there. While higher rate taxpayers will see that capital gains tax increase from 20% to 24%. So big increases. And this actually brings those rates in line with what you would pay if you currently sell a second property. Okay, the capital gains on that, which are already at 18 and 24%, they don't change. Now, that's big changes. However, a lot of the rumours beforehand that they could maybe bring it in line with income tax at 20% and 40%. So good news, it didn't go that far, of course. And the Chancellor did say that these new levels are still the lowest in any of the G7 economies. So potentially, they've got to raise money somehow, and this is where they're going for that. While we're talking about capital gains, I touched on this briefly again. We're personal finance here, not going too much on the business side of things. But if you do have a business, there is something called the Business Asset Disposal Relief, also sometimes known as Entrepreneurs Relief. And basically, if you sell your business, you have a lifetime limit of how much you can get at a lower tax rate of £1 million. Now, that £1 million level is staying the same. There are rumours that it could be removed completely, or if not reduced, but staying at £1 million. But the rate that you pay on that first £1 million, that is going to increase. So it's currently at 10%. From 2025, April 25, that will increase to 14%. And from April 2026, that will increase to 28%. So still eventually bringing it in line with what you might be paying on that broader capital gains tax levels elsewhere. Now, inheritance tax, that was the other kind of big tax thing that people were talking about. And it's one of those weird things that people talk about it and get stressed about it and say, oh, I don't want my inheritance to be my estate to be taxed, when very, very, very few people actually do get taxed. Only people with very, very, very large estates tend to do this. But people get worked up about it anyway. Now, what's happening here is very little at the moment right now anyway. So there was a freeze on the thresholds when inheritance tax does kick in. That's already in place until 2028, and they're going to extend that to 2030. So that means that it won't increase with inflation each year. Okay, so ultimately you could say, a bit like that fiscal drag we had on income tax, that ultimately if people's estates get valued more just because they earn more, property prices go up and all that kind of stuff, that more people will pay it. That's true, but still a small number of people will do it. And that effectively means that the first £325,000 that is left in an estate is tax-free. This goes up to £500,000 if a family home is passed on to a direct descendant, and a further £1 million in total if it's passed on to a spouse, the whole estate. So that's not changing at all. It's not being reduced, but it's also not increasing. There will be some loopholes that are closed, though. One of these is where inherited pensions, right now, they aren't taxed. And some people try and work around that and put more money into their pension, so that isn't taxed when it goes drop down. From April 2027, that will form part of an estate. So more people will be paying tax. And again, we're talking about very high wealthy people here where this is going to apply to. There's also some stuff around with inheritance tax around business and agricultural businesses. When you die, the first 1 million of that is free from inheritance tax if you pass on a farm or you pass on a business. Above that, there will be a new 50% relief. And that effectively means that the money above that, you're paying 20% inheritance tax on the money above that. Again, small number of people, but that's one of the changes they had. And also, don't fully understand this one, but there will be a 50% relief, tax relief on inheritance for all shares on the alternative investment market, again, meaning an effective rate of 20%. And all of those things together, they say, is going to raise about £2 billion. One thing that wasn't announced when it comes to inheritance tax is, and so this is not happening, at least not right now, were changes, and there's been a lot about this over the last few days, were changes to how long you could gift something. So the rules right now are that if you gift something, some money to someone, and you don't die for 7 years, then it doesn't count as part of your estate. But let's say you died in year 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever it might be, then that will be taxed under your full estate if inheritance tax obviously was due. There were lots of rumours that might be increased to 10 years, but that isn't happening, so that stays the same. Benefits. Let's talk about benefits now. So there was there was a thing that was announced that isn't going to happen. And this was not announced in the budget. It was kind of hidden in the document, the huge document, like 170 pages that myself and the team have been looking through as well. It's kind of hidden in there. But this is about how child benefit is calculated. And it previously been announced by the previous government that rather than being based on the income of an individual parent, it was going to be based on household income. That isn't happening. It's still going to remain on the individual parents. So that basically means that if one of the parents earns over 60k, they have to start paying it back on a sliding scale up to £80,000 a year. So yeah, so it's a shame that isn't going to be happening this time around. I'm sure the campaigning will continue there to try and make that easier, make it fairer, because you easily can have a household where one person is two people are high earners and they get it, or one situation where one person's a high earner, the other one doesn't work and they don't. So that is something that isn't happening. One change that is coming along though is around carers allowance. This is obviously, you get this if you are a carer, but there is a restriction on if you get it on how many hours you work. That is going to increase to 16 hours from April 2025 a week. That's how many hours you can work and still be eligible for the free benefit, that carers allowance benefit. There's also going to be changes to how debt is claimed back from universal credit. So if you're on universal credit right now and you owe money on things like council tax or advanced benefit payments or some other things maybe to the council, they can claw some of that back from your monthly payments. It's currently set at 25%, so a quarter of your money could go to pay off that money you owe, which doesn't leave you much because universal credit isn't much anyway. So it doesn't leave you much at all to get through the essentials. And that's going to reduce to 15%. So obviously you've still got to pay it back, and it'll take longer to pay it back, but at least you'll have more money in the here and now to actually make it through the week. And the other thing that was already been announced way back in the day, wasn't obviously mentioned really particularly today, but around winter fuel payments. The change in who will get this to only targeting to those who get pension credit has been very controversial, and a lot of people saying this isn't the fairest way to do this. And there was hope that maybe in the budget something would be said about changing that kind of targeting so more people can get it. Hasn't changed. It's still going to be very much about pension credit, and in the bump, all the information that they send out, you find it on the Treasury website. All that information, it says they're basically going to put a lot of resource and money into try and get more people who are eligible for pension credit to sign up for it. So that's sad news there. That hasn't changed, because there will be some people who miss out on money there who do really need it. Transport now. Okay, so there has been no increase to fuel duty. Again, speculation was there would be, because there hasn't been an increase since 2012. And in fact, 2022, there was a temporary 5p cut introduced when petrol prices were going through the roof. So it was thought that maybe they would come back, but they haven't. They're actually going to be frozen, at least for this year anyway. Both the rates won't increase and that 5p cut will remain. And this is worth about 60 quid for the average driver over a year. Buses, again, this was already announced beforehand, but in England, the £2 cap on bus fares was due to end the end of 2024. It's been extended, which is good news, until the end of 2025, so another year, but at £3 rather than £2. Now, it's good news that it's been extended, because without that, some journeys, particularly longer journeys, could get very expensive. But of course, it's that extra quid if you are travelling, getting bus there and back on most days. Obviously, that's a couple of quid every day, and that will add up over the year for some people. Rail fares, they've announced that in March 2025, rail fares will go up by 4.6%. It's not going to be kind of like every fare goes up by that. It's kind of a bit of wiggle room there between different fares and different operators, but roughly that's what the fares are going to go up by. Now, this is actually a higher than inflation rate. Normally, it is the rate of RPI from July, which is used to set what that increase is going to be. Now, RPI was 3.6%, so that's 1 percentage point increase on top of that. So fares are going up, and they're going up by a little bit more than they should be. And that, again, that was one that was hidden in the documents. Also hidden was the fact that they are looking to, subject to industry approval, they are looking to increase railcard costs by £5. So currently they're 30 quid, so they could go up to 35 quid a year. We don't know when this could happen. Obviously, they've got to go through the industry first of all. The one that will be excluded from this will be the disabled person's railcard, which will stay at its current price. Air passenger duty next. Now, this is going to go up as well, and they said this hasn't kept up with inflation, so there is a higher increase than normal to adjust for that. That basically is going to work out at roughly £2 extra for an economy short-haul flight, less than that, £1 for a domestic economy flight. And this is extra on top of the existing APD, the air passenger duty that's already there. Long-haul destinations, obviously, it will be more than that, and obviously it'll be higher again for premium economy and business class passengers. Now, the next level, this was a bit of a jibe that Rachel Reeves put in Rishi Sunak's direction, because there's all the rumours about him moving off to California in the not too distant future. There will be a higher rate for private jets. That would increase by 50%. So this would work out, the example was about £450 per passenger on a one-way to California on a private jet, how much extra it would cost. There are plans to also extend this to to more private jets as well. So, I mean, I doubt many of us ever get on a private jet, but that's more money coming back into the economy. There are also some quite hefty increases to vehicle excise duty for people buying a new car, and this takes place from the 1st of April 2025. Now, currently right now, if you have a zero emission car, you don't pay anything. That is going to be increased to £10, so still relatively cheap. But as you go above that, the rates increase quite dramatically, and this is because they want to encourage people to go for electric and zero emission cars. And this goes from low emitting cars of 1 to 50 G/kilometers of CO2. It must be grams per kilometer of CO2. That would increase to £110 for that first year. And then it goes 130 for the next chunk. And then any of the cars which are emitting more than 76 grams per kilometre of CO2 will double from their current levels. So again, this can be quite a lot again from the 1st of April next year. So if you are going to buy a new car, you might want to make sure you do that and register it beforehand to save yourself potentially your hundreds of pounds there in that first year. Right, next on to property. Not a huge amount announced here. The main thing they did announce in the speech was around stamp duty when you have a second home, a buy-to-let property or a commercial property. If you're already have a residential home and you're buying something else, this will go up from 3% to 5%. This is on top of the existing stamp duty levels, and that starts from the 31st of October, so almost straight away. So if you haven't completed on the property by the time the budget was announced, then you're going to be hit by this extra 2% of the entire property value. No other changes were announced in terms of stamp duty. They have announced they are going to also make more homes. An extra £500 million going to be made to build 5,000 affordable homes. That's on top of an existing 2.6 billion pound funds. That brings up to 3.1 billion. That's the biggest investment, they say, in over 10 years. 1.5 million homes by the end of this parliament. Next up, pensions. Not a huge amount here. I know there was a huge amount of speculation that we would see changes to the tax relief rates, maybe a universal rate for everyone of like 30% rather than based on your current tax rate, or maybe a decrease in how much you can take tax-free when you first take your pension. None of that has happened. So all those rumours, all that scaremongering around pensions that was going on, didn't happen, hasn't happened. The only thing that really was announced in terms of pension was around the state pension, that it will increase next April by 4.1%, which is in line with the triple lock, which is the highest of wage growth over inflation and other things like that. So that is going to happen, and we knew that one already. Now, savings. Not much was announced there nothing really was announced, but there were a few things in the document that were worth sharing with you. The first one is around ISA allowances. Again, there were rumours these could be cut, or potentially a lifetime limit could be added. They weren't in there. And in fact, what has been announced, though, is those ISA limits are going to stay where they are, and they will stay where they are until at least 2030. So whereas previously they may well have increased in lines with inflation, things like that, they haven't for a while yet, and they won't for another decent chunk, another 6 years or so. That means you can only put in up to £20,000 of new money into your ISA in a financial year. I say only, it's a huge amount of cash. So the fact that it doesn't increase isn't going to impact many people. I think it's much better that money is focused elsewhere. Interesting news around the Help to Save scheme. That was being consulted. What would happen to that? It's due to end next year. The Help to Save scheme is really good if you are on universal credit or benefits, where you can get a 50% bonus from the government for every £50 you save. That is going to be increased for 2 years. Now will end in April 2027, and it's going to be extended to all people on working people on universal credit. Previously, only certain people could get it. So that's good news. If you don't already get that, it's worth having a look, see if you can sign up for it. Starting rate for savings, that also was in the documents, that rate has been frozen. This also is a good option for those of you who earn a huge amount. If you earn less than £17,500, that means you can get an extra £5,000, effectively what tapers down, but it's actually £5,000 extra tax-free allowance for your savings. And the other thing that wasn't announced, which is a shame, but I'll tell you it wasn't announced anyway, were any changes to the lifetime ISA. That rate in which the property you buy, the limit is still at £450,000. That hasn't increased, nor have they done anything to potentially remove that penalty that you pay. Effectively, it's 6.5%-ish that you pay if you want to withdraw that money, maybe because the house you want to buy costs more than £450,000, but no changes there, which is a disappointment. A few other kind of sin taxes to tell you about, and other taxes going on as well. Smokers and vapors, there are going to be some big increases to you. Tobacco duty will continue to go up by RPI plus 2%, but there's also going to be a 10% tax increase for hand-rolled tobacco. Then vaping liquid will have a flat rate from 2026, which works out at £2.20 per 10 ml of liquid. And then to make sure there doesn't suddenly become not much of a difference between vaping and tobacco, there's going to be a similar £2.20 increase for every 100 cigarettes or 50 grams of tobacco, just so they want to tax them both, but they want to encourage people to vape rather than smoke if you're going to do one or the other. There is going to be an increase to the sugar tax, so soft drinks, they will also go up as well. That will be in line with inflation. Alcohol-wise, though, the only thing that was announced here was actually a cut, and this is on draft beer. The duty there will actually go down by 1.7% rather than increase with inflation. And that basically means for an average strength pint from February 2025, you're going to save about a penny. But again, that's to try and sort of help the pub industry a little bit there. Small amount, but let's see if it makes a difference. And the only other sort of tax thing worth mentioning here is around private school fees. Now, this was in the manifesto, so we kind of knew it was coming along anyway, but they'd made it official. Private schools from the 1st of January 2025 will have to pay 20% VAT. The government is also going to be removing business rates, the charitable relief for business rates, those private schools in England will be paying from April 2025. They are the big things there which affect us. A couple other quick things I do want to share with you as well that might be of interest to you. They looked at inflation rate and predicted what that's going to be, where that's going to go. And their target is going to stay at 2%. And they reckon in 5 years' time, it will be at 2%. And over in that time to get there, it's going to average anywhere from like 2.6 down to 2.1, something in that spell. So that's what they're aiming for. That's where they think it's going to be. The important thing for there will be what impact does that have on the base rate? Do we see more cuts as a result of that? They want it to be around that level, so they potentially could keep doing that. And obviously then what impact that has on savings, because the main thing when you have savings accounts is you want to make sure they're earning more than inflation, so at least you're not losing money in real terms. Again, one of their manifesto pledges was to set up GB Energy, and that's going to kind of increase the UK's green energy infrastructure. There's loads and loads of funding announcements were announced, which will have an impact on us, but there were so many of them. Can't go into those details here. But one of them, for example, was about triple the funding for school breakfast clubs. They will try to cut down on tax avoidance. So again, hopefully that won't be impacting any of you, but if you are avoiding tax or refusing to pay tax, there could be some things here. So for example, interest on unpaid tax will be increased. Non-dom tax status is going to be removed. So again, trying to avoid that tax avoidance. Also, windfall tax on energy firms will increase to 38% and run until 2030. So it's going to run for longer. Another kind of businessy one, we obviously it has an impact on us, how the businesses are thriving, not only because they might pay our wages, but it's where we go to spend our time and spend our money. From 2026, there will be lower tax rates for retail, hospitality and leisure businesses. And a couple of other small ones worth sharing with you. There are a couple of compensation funds that have been announced. For victims of the post office scandal, 1.8 billion. And for victims of the infected blood scandals, that's 11.8 billion. So again, you actually, or someone you know might be impacted by that. So you might get some compensation. Of course, it's not going to really make up for the trouble and the trauma that you have been through. There you go. I told you there was a huge amount, and things might still come out of the woodwork over the coming days, but we have got a full article over on becleverwithyourcash.com that will take you through everything you need to know, all things spoken about more just now, with more details and anything that gets added in the coming days. My name's Andy Webb. Thank you so much for watching. Check out this video here for more ways to make the most of your money.